She was just 6, barefoot in the snow, clutching 2 newborns to her chest, her lips blue, her tiny frame trembling against the storm. No coat, no shelter, just love, and a promise she refused to break. Beside her, a worn German shepherd named Titan, the only guardian left standing. Everyone else had turned away. But one man didn't. A billionaire with a broken past and a heart still searching for peace. What he did next will restore your faith in humanity. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you believe that no child should ever be left behind, if you believe in the power of love, hit that subscribe button, because this story will stay in your heart forever. The wind howled through the narrow pass of the Sierra Nevada mountains, dragging coils of snow across the deserted road like pale ghosts. The town of Coldwater, a quiet mountain community tucked deep in northeastern California, had already begun shutting down for the storm. The sky, a leaden sheet, threatened more snow, and the air was so sharp it bit into skin like broken glass. It was on a stretch of forgotten highway, Route 243, that a small figure trudged forward, almost invisible beneath the flurry. Harper Miller was 6 years old, but today she moved like someone twice her age. Her cheeks, normally freckled and sun-pink, were chalky with cold. Her pale blonde hair was matted beneath a hand-knit wool cap, too small for her head. Her coat, a second-hand thing with a busted zipper, hung open at the front, exposing a thin hoodie soaked in snow. In her arms, 2 newborns were swaddled in hospital-grade blankets, barely breathing, their tiny faces pressed against Harper's chest for warmth. Each step was agony. Her thin boots, lined only with newspaper, did little to stop the snow from seeping in. Her legs ached from exhaustion, and her lips cracked from the wind. Still, Harper pressed on, whispering gently to the babies, Luke and Levi, her brothers, born just 2 weeks prior. "Shh, it's okay," she murmured in a voice hoarse with cold. "I won't let anyone take you, not ever." Behind her trotted Titan, a large and aging German shepherd. He was at least 7 years old, with a thick coat mottled black and sable, his ears always alert, his amber eyes sharp despite the cataract forming in the left. His gait was heavy, favoring a back leg stiff from an old injury. A faint scar traced down his right flank, a memory from his time spent living on the streets after his first owner passed away. Titan had once belonged to Harper's mother, Madison, who had named him not for his size, but for the mythic strength she believed he gave her during her darkest years. "You'll be our Titan," she had whispered, "the one who holds everything together when the world falls apart." And that was exactly what Titan was doing now. He walked beside Harper like a silent sentinel, occasionally bumping his broad shoulder into her when she started to stagger. Every so often, he would step ahead and sniff the snow, then glance back with quiet urgency, nudging her gently toward an old logging trail barely visible beneath the drifts. Hours earlier, inside the Santa Clara Children's Shelter, Harper had overheard something that shattered her world. Mrs. Langdon, the facility's brittle, stern-faced director with narrow eyes and a voice like dry paper, had spoken in hushed tones to a man in a long gray coat about separating the twins. "They're both going to different foster families," she'd said. "It's already approved." Harper had frozen by the stairwell. She knew that voice. It was the same woman who always said things like, "You're not in charge here," and "You're lucky we took you in." But today, her words had felt like knives. Harper had made a promise to her mother, a final, urgent promise whispered through tears the night she handed her children to the system. "Don't let them take the boys from each other. Promise me, Harper. No matter what happens, they stay together." That night, when the storm rolled in and the power flickered, Harper slipped out. She wrapped Luke and Levi in whatever blankets she could find. Titan, as if sensing the storm in her heart more than in the sky, had waited by the back door of the shelter's kitchen, as if he knew. He had always known. He had followed her out into the snow without hesitation. Now, they had been walking for hours. Harper's limbs felt hollow. The babies had stopped crying long ago, sleeping against her like tiny weights of hope. Titan suddenly halted, tail straight, ears forward. A low growl escaped his throat, not of danger, but determination. Before Harper stood a rusted metal gate partially hidden beneath the snow, with a faded sign that read, "Ranger Trail," 1.2 miles. It led to a ranger's cabin abandoned years ago but sometimes used by hikers in emergency. Her mother had once pointed it out on a wrinkled old map they kept in a hollowed-out Bible, one of the few things Harper had smuggled out with her. Titan sniffed the air and barked once, just once. It was short and resolute. "Okay," Harper said through chattering teeth. "Let's go." They slipped past the gate, Titan taking the lead now, every step deliberate. Snow fell harder, heavier, but the trees offered some shelter. Harper stumbled once, then again. Titan circled back, gently nosing under her arm and letting her lean on his side. She clung to him, using the pressure of his frame to steady herself. "I'm tired," she whispered, "but I gotta keep going." A gust of wind cut across the trees and Harper shielded the twins with her body. Titan stood over all three like a fortress. For a moment, they simply stood there, three souls against the cold alone, yet not lost. And though no one else could hear it, in that breath of silence between storms, the snow seemed to whisper back, "Keep going." Lake Tahoe was emptying fast as the storm rolled in. The glistening lake, usually a hub of laughter, skiers, and high-end suits, had gone silent beneath a curtain of snow. Most guests at the Grand Summit Resort had checked out early, fleeing toward the coast. Only those with obligations remained. Owen Blackwood was one of them. Inside his black Escalade, Owen gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. He was dressed sharply tailored wool coat over a crisp charcoal suit, black gloves, and Italian shoes now damp from stepping out into the slush earlier. His hair was neat, dark brown brushed back, and flecks of gray at his temples made him look older than 36. But the sharp lines around his mouth didn't come from age. They came from memory. He adjusted the radio, tried to focus on the financial report read aloud by his assistant over speakerphone, but his mind drifted. The board meeting had been a disaster, another acquisition falling through. The numbers didn't matter. Not really. He had everything: money, press coverage, even a philanthropic fund in his name, and yet, it always felt like something was missing. As the Escalade climbed the snowy incline away from Tahoe's business district, Owen noticed movement ahead. Something small, fragile. At first it looked like a bundle of discarded fabric blowing slightly in the wind, but as he neared, the shape sharpened into something unmistakably human. A child. He slammed the brakes. The SUV fishtailed slightly before stopping. Owen stared, mouth agape, through the windshield. A little girl, no older than 6, sat huddled in the snow at the edge of the road. Her arms were wrapped tightly around a bundle too, actually. Babies, their faces barely visible under the blankets. Behind them stood a large German shepherd, hackles raised, eyes locked on the SUV. Owen threw the vehicle in park and jumped out. The cold punched him in the chest like a fist. He stumbled toward them, hands raised slowly. "Hey!" he called out over the wind. "It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." The girl didn't move. She was shaking, eyes wide with fear, teeth chattering. The dog, massive, black and tan, with tired eyes and a scar across one shoulder, stepped in front of her. He growled low, deep from the chest, a sound that stopped Owen in his tracks. Titan stood his ground, unmoving, as the snow swirled between them. Owen crouched slowly, holding his hands out. "I'm not a bad guy," he said gently. "You all look like you need help." The girl's voice came, faint as a breath. "Don't come closer." "I won't," he promised. "My name's Owen. I have a warm car. It's just over there." He pointed behind him without turning. "It has heat. And food." Titan's growl subsided slightly, but he didn't relax. The little girl looked down at the babies in her arms. "They're cold." "I know," Owen said, his voice cracking as he saw the frost along the newborn's eyebrows. "Let me help." She hesitated. Her lips moved, but he couldn't hear. He took a slow step forward. Titan didn't growl this time, but he didn't move either. "What's your name?" Owen asked. "Harper," she replied after a long pause. "This is Luke and Levi." Owen blinked. "Twins?" Harper nodded. "Are they your brothers?" "Uh-huh." He took another step. "Harper, if you'll let me, I can take you to a warm place. You won't be separated, I promise." Titan let out a short huff more like a breath than a growl, and took one step back. Harper stared at the dog, then at Owen. Her arms were trembling now, and the weight of the twins seemed to press heavier. "Okay," she whispered. Owen rushed forward, his coat open, already shrugging it off. "Here, take this," Wrap it around you." He knelt down beside them, gently cradling one of the twins. The baby barely stirred. Harper handed him the other, watching every movement like a hawk. Titan hovered close, his massive frame pressed against Harper's back as if shielding her from the entire world. Together, they made their way to the car. Inside, warmth blossomed. Harper gasped as the heat hit her face, and she pulled the twins closer. Owen turned up the temperature, fished out 2 energy bars and bottled water from the glove box. Titan jumped into the back without hesitation, curling around the children like a shield. Owen glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You're a good dog." Harper nodded slowly. "His name's Titan." "That's a strong name." "My mom gave it to him. She said Titan was like a guardian. He kept her safe when we had no one else." Owen swallowed the lump in his throat. He remembered his own childhood dog scout. A mutt from a shelter, all ribs and tail when he found her at 8 years old. She'd been the only one to stay with him when the foster homes kept changing, when food was scarce, when he cried himself to sleep night after night. Scout had died the same week he turned 16. He hadn't cried at her funeral, not then, but his chest ached now just thinking about it. "Titan reminds me of someone," Owen said softly. Harper tilted her head. "You had a dog?" He nodded. "A long time ago. She protected me too, when no one else would." Harper stared at him a moment longer, then leaned back, resting her head on Titan's side. Her eyes began to close, the exhaustion overtaking her. Owen watched her in the mirror. The fire in her gaze earlier still lingered, but it flickered now, fading, but not gone. He shifted into drive. The snow kept falling, but inside the car, it was warm. And for the first time in a long while, so was Owen's heart. Inside the heated SUV, the cold began to evaporate from Harper's skin, but not from her bones. She sat stiffly, knees pulled up, holding Levi and Luke like porcelain dolls that might shatter if she blinked. Her lashes were heavy with frost, and her arms trembled visibly now that the adrenaline of escape was fading. Even the warmth of the car seemed distant, like something she hadn't earned. Owen drove slowly, eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. Snow slapped gently against the windshield, but his mind was louder than the storm. The silence behind him wasn't quiet, it was loaded. The kind of silence that had weight, pain, and maybe a little fear. "I have sandwiches," he said finally, his voice soft. "Peanut butter and jelly. Not fancy, but they're fresh." No response. He glanced in the mirror again. Harper hadn't even looked at him. Her focus stayed fixed on the babies, on each tiny breath, as if watching them was the only way to ensure they'd keep going. Titan, curled beside her on the seat, lifted his head at the word sandwich, ears tilting, but he didn't move closer. Instead, he nudged Harper gently with his nose. Her hands gripped the twins tighter. Owen slowed the SUV to a stop on a flat turnout off the highway. They were halfway between Tahoe and Coldwater Ridge, with another 15 minutes to go before reaching town. He unwrapped a sandwich, careful not to make sudden movements, and set it on a cloth napkin across the center console. "It's right here if you want it," he said. "No strings." Harper's stomach betrayed her. A soft growl broke the silence. Her lips pressed tighter. "I know you're scared," Owen added. "You've had to be strong, stronger than most adults I know, but even strong people need to eat." Still nothing. Then Titan stirred. With surprising gentleness, the big dog stretched his neck forward and nudged the sandwich with his snout. He didn't try to eat it. Instead, he used his nose to push the napkin toward Harper, inch by inch. Owen watched, breath held. Harper blinked, once, twice, then finally looked at Titan. His head tilted in that way dogs do when they know more than they can say. Harper's lips trembled. "You really trust him?" she whispered to Titan. The dog's answer was wordless. He sat up, turned to Owen, and stared into the man's face. There was a long pause. Something unspoken passed between man and dog, and then Titan slowly moved to sit at Owen's side. Not with suspicion, not with resistance, just sat. Harper's eyes widened. "He never does that," she murmured. "He doesn't even like the lady at the shelter, but he likes you." Owen met her gaze. "Then maybe you can trust me too. A little." She didn't speak, but her arms finally loosened, just enough to reach forward. Fingers shaking, she took the sandwich and brought it to her lips. She didn't devour it, but she didn't stop either. Bite by bite, she began to eat. Owen sat back and let out a breath. Luke stirred in her arms, and Harper immediately shifted to soothe him. "Shh, you're okay," she whispered. "You're okay now." Owen watched the scene unfold, and something tightened in his chest. He didn't know what he had expected when he stopped the car, maybe a scared child, a panicked story. But what he found instead was a protector, a sister with fire in her soul and exhaustion in her bones. He reached toward the dashboard, adjusting the heat again. Titan, almost as if reading his intent, stood up and gently pressed the climate button with his nose pushing it higher toward Harper's seat. The fan grew warmer. Owen stared. Harper followed his gaze. "He does that," she said quietly. "He always knows when I'm cold." "You two are something," Owen replied. There was a pause. "I'm not letting them go," Harper said suddenly, as if challenging him. "No matter what happens." Owen turned fully toward her, expression serious. "I wouldn't ask you to." "But they always split families," she said. "They say it's what's best, but it's not. It's just easier." Owen nodded slowly. "I know." "Do you?" she challenged. He hesitated. "I was in the system too, 8 years old. My sister and I were sent to different places. I never saw her again." Harper's stare softened just a little. "Then you know." "I do, and I'm not going to let that happen to you." "You promise?" There it was, the word, heavy and sharp, as if dipped in the weight of every adult who had broken it before. Owen leaned in just slightly. "I promise, Harper, and I keep my promises." Titan gave a soft chuff, as if confirming it. Harper said nothing, but her shoulders sank slightly. A surrender not of strength, but of aloneness. Owen turned back to the wheel, eyes blinking against something that threatened to rise. They drove on. The storm had begun to slow by the time Owen pulled into the underground garage of his mountain cabin just outside Coldwater Ridge. Snow still drifted lazily from the pine-covered sky, but the wind had quieted into a hush, like the forest itself was waiting to see what would happen next. The cabin wasn't lavish, at least not by Owen's standards. A stone fireplace, warm timber walls, and a loft overlooking a large open room with an old leather couch and mismatched chairs. It had once belonged to his adoptive grandfather, a rugged man with a stern jaw and eyes that rarely blinked. Owen had inherited the place after the man's passing and kept it as a place to hide from the noise of Silicon Valley. Until now, it had been a sanctuary for solitude, but tonight, it became something else. Harper was asleep on the couch, her small frame curled protectively around Levi and Luke, one on each side. Titan lay at her feet, his large head resting atop her shins, ears relaxed, body still like a statue carved from loyalty. The firelight danced over the scar across his flank and softened the weary lines in Harper's face. Despite the cold outside, the room glowed with the warmth of something deeper than wood or stone trust. Owen stood a few feet away, phone raised. He captured the moment. A child who had carried the world through a snowstorm, now sleeping with her warriors beside her. He hesitated, then opened his contacts and typed, "To Grace Holloway. Subject, they're real. We need to talk." Attached was the photo. Grace Holloway had never been what you'd call warm. At 38, she had the energy of someone who lived on burnt coffee and deadlines. Tall and lean, with short curly hair dyed burgundy and constantly pulled into a functional bun, Grace dressed in layers of utility. Cargo pants, windbreakers, and a brown leather satchel that clinked with hidden recorders and backup batteries. She'd once been a rising star in broadcast journalism, but burned too many bridges chasing a story about corruption in California's Child Protective Services. Blacklisted, she became a freelance investigator and truth chaser, earning a reputation for being relentless, sharp-tongued, and, according to some, dangerous to powerful people. Owen had met her 3 years ago during a mutual charity campaign. He funded her reporting when no one else would. In return, she'd broken stories that saved children and ruined careers. Now, her reply came swiftly. "Grace. Send location. I'm driving tonight. And Owen, if that's the girl from the shelter, this goes deeper than we thought. While the twins slept, Owen gently draped another blanket over Harper. She stirred briefly, whispering something inaudible, then fell back into her dreams. He stepped out onto the porch, where the wind carried only the faint sounds of cracking trees and distant owls. He dialed. "Grace," he said as she picked up. "You got my message?" "I did. And I ran your girl's face through image archives from the Miller's Hope surveillance leaks last month. Her name is Harper Miller. Her mother was Madison Ray Miller, went missing 2 years ago after filing 3 abuse complaints against a man named Robert Kane, then suddenly withdrew them." Owen's knuckles tightened around the railing. Why would she withdraw? Because Kane has money and reach. He's ex-military, private security now. And guess who's funding Miller's Hope? Owen's gut turned cold. "Tell me." "A shell company, linked back to a former hedge fund manager turned adoption intermediary, ties to multiple orphanages across the state. Children disappear, paperwork gets sealed, donations roll in." Owen was silent. Grace continued, her voice sharp. "You were right to pull her out. If the twins were sent to separate homes, chances are they wouldn't make it past the state lines. I have documents to prove it, and I'll need that photo for the article. People need to see what they're trying to break apart." "I already sent it." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Owen, what's she like?" He looked back through the window. Harper, still curled around her brothers, Titan not moving an inch. "She's braver than most adults I know, and that dog Titan, he'd walk through fire for her." Grace exhaled. "Then we better make sure they never have to." As the call ended, Owen returned inside. The fire crackled. Harper still slept, but this time her face looked different, not completely free, but less haunted. Titan lifted his head briefly, then rested it back down. Owen sat down nearby and pulled out a worn legal pad from the drawer. He scribbled one word at the top: plan. Then he began to write. Morning light seeped gently through the tall pine trees surrounding the cabin. The snow had finally stopped, leaving behind a crystalline stillness that coated every branch, every stone, in delicate white. The world looked peaceful, but inside the cabin, everything was shifting. Owen stood at the kitchen counter, pouring black coffee into a chipped ceramic mug. His eyes were heavy from a sleepless night. The fire had burned low, and Titan, for the first time since their arrival, was not in his usual post beside Harper. Instead, the big German shepherd sat silently beside Owen, alert but calm, his thick tail resting against the oak floor. Grace had arrived late, sometime past midnight, bundled in a dark green parka still dusted with snow. Her sharp eyes scanned the cabin before settling on the couch where Harper slept. They hadn't spoken much, just traded facts, suspicions, and worry. Now, as the sun crept higher, Grace sat at the large wooden dining table, papers and files spread around her like puzzle pieces waiting to be joined. "I found something," she said quietly, sliding a folder toward Owen. He opened it slowly. Inside was a series of scanned documents, police reports, hospital records, and signed withdrawal forms, each one pointing toward a story that had been buried. Grace tapped the topmost report with a red fingernail. Madison Ray Miller filed 3 complaints against Robert Kane in under 6 months. Physical abuse, financial threats. The last report: she had bruised ribs, a sprained wrist, and was 2 months pregnant. Owen's face tightened. "And then she withdrew everything." "Exactly. Same pattern we've seen before. The system marked it as resolved. She vanished 6 months later. No follow-up, no trace." He clenched the folder, jaw hardening. "She didn't choose to leave Harper. She was forced." Grace nodded grimly. "And based on this," she said, pulling out another document, "she tried to contact someone at a local women's shelter in Coldwater, but the call was interrupted. I traced it to a gas station payphone. A man matching Kane's description was seen arguing with a woman there that same day." As Owen processed the information, the soft sound of movement from the hallway caught their attention. Harper stood near the corner, hair tangled, oversized hoodie slipping off one shoulder. Her face was pale, lips pressed into a hard line. She wasn't supposed to be awake yet. She had clearly heard everything. Did she leave because she wanted to?" Harper asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Or did he make her?" Owen's heart broke at the question. He took a step forward, but Harper stepped back. "Harper," he said gently, "she didn't leave you. She tried to protect you." Then why didn't she come back? The girl snapped, the tremble in her voice betraying her calm. Why didn't she find me? She promised, just like everyone does. Grace stood, unsure whether to intervene. Titan looked between them, then uncharacteristically stood and walked toward Owen sitting beside him. His presence was calm, firm, grounding. Harper noticed. "He's never done that," she whispered. "He always stays with me." Owen lowered himself to one knee, Titan unmoving at his side. Maybe he thinks I need reminding too, that it's time I stop reading files and start doing something real. She didn't answer, just turned and walked toward the room she'd been sleeping in, door closing behind her. Owen stood slowly, hand resting on Titan's neck. Grace sighed, collecting a few papers into her satchel. "She's going to need more than truth, Owen. She needs her mother." "Then I'm going to find her," he said. Grace arched an eyebrow. "You know that might put a target on your back." "I don't care. Harper deserves answers and a chance to believe in someone again. I'll help however I can." "Thank you," he said. "But this part, I think I need to do it myself." Titan gave a low huff like he agreed. It took 2 days, 2 burner phones, and 3 false leads before Owen finally stood outside a small roadside diner called Bluebird Grill, tucked away along Route 18 in the dusty outskirts of Pine Hollow, Nevada. The town was quiet, almost too quiet, a place with 1 gas station, 1 bar, and a long list of people who didn't ask questions. Owen leaned against the side of a parked SUV, eyes scanning the glass windows of the diner. Inside, the early lunch crowd was thin 2 elderly men drinking coffee, a trucker eating chili, and 1 waitress moving between them like clockwork. She wore a pale blue apron, a faded name tag that read Jennifer, and her chestnut hair was tied in a tight bun beneath a white cap. She looked worn, like a painting that had once been full of color but had faded over time. Her face was thinner now, cheekbones more pronounced, but her eyes, they were Harper's. Owen stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled, drawing her attention. For a brief moment, their eyes locked and everything froze. He didn't speak her name, not yet. He ordered coffee, sat at the corner booth, and waited. When she finally approached, she spoke first. "You're not from around here." Owen looked up. "No, I'm looking for someone." Jennifer's hand trembled slightly as she poured the coffee. "Lots of people pass through here looking. I'm looking for Madison Ray Miller." The pitcher stopped midair. The cup overflowed slightly before she realized. Her voice cracked. "I don't know who that is." Owen leaned forward. "You do. She's the mother of Harper, Luke, and Levi." The name Harper hit like a bullet. Her knees buckled, and she dropped into the booth across from him without asking. "They're alive?" she whispered. Owen nodded slowly. "All 3. Tears spilled silently. She pressed a napkin to her mouth as if trying to muffle the sound of her heart breaking open. "I thought... Robert told me they'd been taken. He said if I ever tried to find them, he'd make them disappear." "He tried," Owen said. "But Harper didn't let that happen. She carried them through a blizzard." Madison's hands shook uncontrollably. Her voice dropped to a rasp. "She was 6 when I last saw her. I tucked her in that night, kissed her forehead, and the next morning, he took everything. My purse, my ID, said I was unfit. He filed a restraining order using his connections. I couldn't even prove I was their mother." Owen reached across the table. "You don't have to hide anymore, but we have to be careful. He's still watching." Madison's eyes flashed with fire beneath her tears. "Then help me get to them." They moved quickly. Madison handed in her apron, claimed a sudden migraine, and slipped out the back with Owen before anyone could ask questions. She grabbed a small bag from a locker, a duffel that looked more survival than travel. As they drove north, she pressed her forehead to the window. "Tell me about them, please." Owen told her everything, how Harper kept her promise, how Titan, the old German shepherd, became their guardian, how Levi cried less when wrapped next to his sister, and how Luke had already learned to squeeze fingers when hungry. By the time they reached the Coldwater Ridge cabin, dusk had descended like a warm blanket over the trees. Inside, the fireplace crackled, and soft lullabies hummed from Grace's phone as she rocked the twins gently. Harper sat on the floor in silence, legs crossed, staring at the flames. Her face was blank, as if emotion had become too dangerous. Titan lay nearby, tail motionless. Then Harper began to cry. She didn't wail, didn't sob. The tears slipped out silently, like the melting edge of a frozen heart. Grace reached toward her, but Harper shook her head and curled tighter into herself. In the silence, Titan rose. With a slow, deliberate movement, he stepped toward Harper. She didn't look up. He placed one heavy paw against the door, claws ticking softly, then looked at her. She blinked, confused. Then he nudged the door open with his nose, turned back, and walked toward her bed. Harper hesitated, then followed. She climbed beneath the covers. Titan climbed in after her, curling his body protectively along her side. It was the first time in weeks he'd willingly climbed onto any bed. Grace turned away, hand over her mouth. Moments later, Owen entered with Madison. Harper was already drifting to sleep, head resting against Titan's fur. But when the door creaked, she stirred. Her eyes met Madison's. Everything paused. Madison stepped forward but didn't speak. Her hands trembled. Harper sat up slowly. "Are you real?" Madison's voice cracked. "If you want me to be." Titan watched, tail flicking once. Then Harper rose, crossed the room, and fell into her mother's arms. The morning after the reunion, the cabin felt transformed. The fire still crackled in the hearth, snow still lay heavy on the roof, and the smell of pine and cinnamon still lingered in the air. But something deeper had shifted. A quiet warmth had returned to the space, the kind that doesn't come from firewood or blankets. It came from something whole being stitched back together. Grace Holloway sat at the edge of the room, her worn leather satchel beside her, phone balanced in her lap. She wasn't just an observer, she was a silent archivist of truth. She had recorded the night before, the door creaking open, Harper's hesitant breath, and the trembling voice that said, "Harper Rose." The moment the little girl heard her mother call her by that name, a name no one else had used in over 2 years, she had cracked wide open. Her brave shell fell away. She had run across the room with a sob that collapsed into Madison's arms. And Titan, watching closely, had let out a quiet bark, not one of warning, but of recognition. His tail wagged, slow and steady, like the last barrier of doubt falling away. Now, Harper sat nestled between Madison and Titan on the couch. Luke and Levi lay swaddled in a playpen nearby, tiny fists stretching toward the ceiling in perfect, sleepy synchrony. Madison hadn't stopped touching her daughter since they woke, brushing hair from her eyes, smoothing her back, memorizing every breath. Owen stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, leaning against the counter with quiet awe. He hadn't spoken much that morning. He didn't need to. He simply watched the family he had helped stitch back together, watched the fire in Harper's eyes begin to flicker with something other than survival, watched Madison's face soften with every passing second. Titan, ever loyal, stayed by Harper's side, but now allowed others to approach. His ears no longer twitched at every sound. His posture had shifted from vigilant protector to proud guardian. He had fulfilled what Madison once asked of him. Keep them safe when I'm gone, and he had, beyond all odds. Grace finally stood, stretching her back. Her long coat rustled as she moved. "I need to get back to the city," she said, checking the timestamp on her footage. "I have enough evidence now. With Madison's testimony and Harper's ID records, I can blow this thing wide open." Madison looked up, still holding Harper's hand. "You'll really do it?" Grace gave her a look sharp, unwavering. "The world needs to see what's been happening in these shelters. What happened to you, to Harper, it wasn't just neglect. It was systematic. It was criminal." "Do you think they'll listen?" Owen asked. "They'll have to," Grace replied, sliding her phone into her bag. "And if they don't, I'll make them." As she moved to the door, Owen followed. They paused on the porch, the snow crunching under their feet. The wind had returned, but gentler now, more whisper than howl. "You've done good, Owen," Grace said, "but you're not done." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I'm starting something." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Titan Shelter," Owen said. "A nonprofit. Safe homes, legal protection, and therapy for displaced children and guardians like Madison. We'll partner with whistleblowers, ex-lawyers, investigators. I want to rebuild the part of the system that failed me, and almost failed them." Grace's smile was small but real. "Count me in." They shook hands. Back inside, Madison had begun telling Harper small stories, soft, scattered pieces of their past. The way Harper once insisted her teddy bear get tucked in before bedtime. The day they made snow angels in their tiny yard. Harper listened with a slight smile, one that occasionally gave way to giggles. "I remember that," she whispered once. "You used to call Titan Mr. Snuffles when he was a puppy," Madison added. Harper looked at the old dog. "He hated it, didn't he?" Titan sneezed, then stretched out dramatically at her feet. Madison laughed. At some point, Luke began to cry, and Madison shifted to pick him up, rocking him gently against her chest. Harper followed, carefully lifting Levi. The family moved as a unit now, a rhythm that had returned as if it had never left. Owen stepped back into the room, taking it all in, the sound, the smell, the light, and quietly pulled out his phone. He snapped one photo. It wasn't for press. It wasn't for proof. It was for memory. For the moment, love became louder than fear. The frost had melted, not just from the soil, but from the edges of every heart that had weathered the storm. It was late March in Mendocino County, Northern California. The farm sat tucked between gentle hills, cedar trees swaying softly in the breeze. Green had returned to the land-tender shoots pushing through earth once buried under snow. A red barn stood proudly at the heart of the property with faded white trim and a hand-painted sign that now read in bright, hopeful letters, "Titan Shelter." Children's laughter carried through the air like wind chimes. The old farmhouse had been converted. 2 upstairs rooms became temporary foster beds, while the sunroom had been turned into a reading nook wrapped in stained glass. In the field, a garden grew under the care of volunteers, many of them young mothers who had once known fear but now lived with dignity. Harper Miller stood on the back porch, her pale blonde hair now longer, brushed back in 2 tight braids. A dark blue school backpack rested on her shoulders, and her eyes, those same steady eyes, searched the sky as she waited for the yellow school bus to arrive. She was 7 now, a full year older than the girl who had once walked barefoot through snow. Her cheeks were fuller, her step more assured, but she still glanced over her shoulder each morning to make sure Titan was watching. And he always was. Titan, now nearly 8, lay sprawled on a wool rug just inside the glass door. His black and sable coat had dulled to gray around his muzzle, and his hind legs had grown stiff, but he remained a towering, comforting presence. No longer a fierce protector, but a sage. The children called him Professor Titan, and at the shelter, he was more than a dog, he was legend. Each week, Harper's classmates wrote him letters. Some tucked treats into envelopes, others just drew hearts. Inside the kitchen, Madison stirred a pot of oatmeal on the stove. Her apron was stained with flour, and she hummed a lullaby under her breath, one she hadn't remembered in years until Harper hummed it back to her one night. Her once gaunt face had softened, her eyes now crinkled when she smiled, and she smiled often. Owen sat at the table with Luke on his lap and Levi playing with his watch. He had traded his tailored suits for denim shirts and rolled-up sleeves. Though he still split his time between the boardroom and the barn, his office now had photos of handprints and crayon drawings alongside framed patents. And then there was Eleanor Blackwood Owen's biological mother, who had returned into his life like spring after a long winter. She was in her 60s, slim, with silver curls and warm hazel eyes that mirrored his. A retired art teacher from Oregon, she had spent decades searching for her son after losing him to a broken foster system in the 90s. Their reunion had taken time, healing, and letters that began with, "I thought about you every day." Now, Eleanor lived in the guest house beside the orchard and hosted watercolor classes every Saturday for the children. She always saved a seat for Harper. Today was Harper's birthday. They kept the celebration simple, as she preferred. A small table under the oak tree, lemon cupcakes, 3 balloons, blue, yellow, and green, tied to a jar of wildflowers Harper had picked herself. A few kids from the shelter joined, and Grace Holloway even drove in from the city to drop off a thick journal engraved with gold lettering, "Truth Matters." After the cupcakes were gone and the sun began to dip, Harper sat alone under the tree, watching the others play. Titan ambled over, slower now, but still proud. He lay beside her, his breath deep and rhythmic. Harper placed her small hand on his paw. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Titan's tail thumped gently once. "You brought me home." "What?" You kept us safe." He didn't move. "I promised too, remember?" she said, leaning closer. "I told you I'd take care of them. And I will. Just like you." Her voice trembled. "I'm gonna help kids like me. Like us. I'll keep them together. I'll keep them warm. I'll fight for them." Titan blinked slowly, eyes deep with something between understanding and peace. "Happy birthday, Harper," someone shouted from the porch. She turned, smiling, then leaned down and kissed Titan's forehead. "I love you," she whispered. "Rest if you need to. I'll watch now." Later that night, Owen stood in the doorway of Harper's room. Madison rocked Luke and Levi quietly in the nursery next door. A soft rain tapped the windows and the air smelled of lavender and clean earth. Harper was writing in her new journal. "What are you working on?" Owen asked. She looked up. "A list," he smiled. "Of what?" "Things I'm thankful for." "Can I hear some?" She nodded. "My brothers, my mom, you, Titan, the stars, warm shoes, pancakes." He chuckled. "That's a solid list." She hesitated. "And second chances." Owen stepped in and kissed her forehead. "You've earned all of them." She smiled, then turned a page and wrote something quietly. Later, when she was asleep, he glanced at the page. In her careful handwriting, she had written, "I didn't know winter could bring spring, but it did, because love never freezes." Sometimes, miracles don't come as thunder or lightning. They come in the shape of a little girl with bare feet in the snow, a mother who never stopped loving, a stranger who chose to care, and a dog who refused to give up. This story reminds us that even in the coldest winter, God's love can find a way to bring spring into the hearts of the broken. In our everyday lives, it's easy to overlook the quiet battles people are fighting, or the silent heroes who carry others through the storm. But when love leads and faith follows, healing happens, families are restored, lives are saved, and hope rises again. So if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Leave a comment to let us know where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of grace, courage, and redemption. And if you believe that God's love can turn any pain into purpose, and every ending into a new beginning, type Amen in the comments, and may the Lord bless and protect you and your family always.